Most people give up after losing it all. He didn't. And what he built from nothing will leave you speechless. No one expected the fire to spread so fast. Least of all Jack Morrissey, who had been dozing on his recliner in the back office of the auto shop he'd built with his bare hands over 15 long, oil-stained years. 1 minute, he was dreaming of engine pistons clicking in rhythm, the next, smoke was curling through the vents, black and hungry. At first, he didn't panic. The shop had seen a few minor sparks before, a welding torch mishap, a leaky tank left too close to a heater. But when he stepped outside and saw the back half of the building swallowed in flame, the reality hit like a punch to the gut. He ran. Called 911. Grabbed the fire extinguisher even though he knew it was pointless. The fire had already gotten into the roof, licking through the rafters like it knew it had won. By the time the fire truck screamed down Watson Avenue, there wasn't much left to save. Jack stood across the street, hands black with soot, his shirt open at the chest and eyes glazed. It wasn't just a shop. It was his second home, his pride, his identity. And it was gone in 47 minutes. The firefighters didn't look at him when they emerged from the smoke. They were too used to faces like his, shocked, slack, hollow. His ex-wife, Leah, showed up about an hour later. She had that look she always wore when she thought he'd screwed something up but couldn't bring herself to say it. Was anyone inside? She asked. No, Jack said. Just me. She didn't hug him. Didn't even pat his shoulder. Just nodded and stood beside him like a stranger waiting for a cab. The insurance rep showed up 3 days later. The cause? Electrical fault. The outcome? We regret to inform you. Legal jargon swirled like ashes. Apparently, the paperwork hadn't been updated since Jack took out a second mortgage to buy new equipment 2 years ago. His coverage didn't include the upgrades. Translation, he was screwed. His savings? Already thin. Most had gone into the business. Retirement? Non-existent. Jack was 52, and everything he owned smelled like smoke. His son, Cole, didn't answer his texts. That wasn't new. They hadn't spoken in 6 months, ever since Jack missed his college graduation because the shop had a last-minute delivery. Jack had tried to explain, but Cole had stared at him like he was a stranger, said, "You always choose work," and hung up. The only person who came to see him that week was Darla, who ran the diner 2 blocks over. She brought him coffee in a paper bag with a greasy breakfast sandwich inside. "You can't just sit here and rot, Jack," she said, not unkindly. "Come by the diner. Wash some dishes. Anything. You need to keep moving." He thanked her and didn't go. Instead, he wandered. Some days he ended up by the river. Others at the edge of the industrial park, where his competitors still lit their neon signs and took walk-ins. He walked past them like a ghost, unsure if they recognized him or just didn't care. What gnawed at him more than the loss of the building was the silence that followed. No machines, no banter with the guys in the shop, no phones ringing with customers. Just empty space and the weight of everything he didn't say to the people who'd once loved him. One night, about a month after the fire, he found himself outside a junkyard on the outskirts of town. A rusted gate, no security cameras, no one around. He climbed the fence, landed wrong, and felt his knee twist. Sat there in the dirt, laughing bitterly. In the middle of the wreckage, he saw an old truck, one of the first models he'd ever fixed. Battered. Stripped. Forgotten. But something about it struck him. Not everything had to stay burned. Maybe, just maybe, this was where it began again. Jack went back the next day. This time, he brought a flashlight, a thermos of coffee, and a crowbar, just in case someone gave him trouble. But no one did. The junkyard seemed abandoned in the way some places are not forgotten, just ignored. He made his way to the truck, a 1967 Chevy C10, sun-bleached and bone-dry from decades of summer heat and Midwest snow. The windshield was cracked. Tires rotted down to cords. But when he opened the hood, something shifted in his chest. The engine was still there. Rusted, sure. Half-gutted. But not hopeless. He didn't have a shop anymore. Didn't even have a garage. What he did have was a cousin named Hank with a farmhouse and a shed, and a soft spot for Jack, even if they hadn't spoken since Aunt Marlene's funeral. By the weekend, the Chevy was loaded onto a flatbed, riding out toward the cornfields, a relic of something that might matter again. Jack stood beside it, wind cutting through his jacket, heart doing something strange, fluttering like hope. "Fixin' up old junk now," Hank said, watching the truck get lowered into the dirt. "Figured it's cheaper than therapy," Jack replied. Hank chuckled. "Well, you can keep it here long as you want. Don't burn the place down." The first night working on the truck felt surreal. Jack's hands trembled when he picked up a socket wrench. Not from fear. From rust. From disuse. It had only been a few weeks since the fire, but already he felt out of place with tools. But as the hours ticked by, and as he popped out corroded bolts, pried apart panels, and scribbled down parts lists, he started to feel something else, a flicker of identity returning. Not businessman Jack. Not shop owner Jack. Just Jack, the man who loved machines. He sold his TV for seed money. Then the recliner. Then his old baseball card collection. He posted flyers in town offering repair services, small stuff. Lawnmowers, chainsaws, bikes. No one responded for days. Then one guy did, a farmer with a busted tiller. Word got around. Slowly. But it got around. Jack started bartering instead of charging. A carburetor fixed for a bag of groceries. An oil change in exchange for a used welder. In the back of Hank's shed, the Chevy came alive piece by piece. It was quiet, thankless work. No applause, no invoices. Just sweat and silence. But it gave him something to wake up for. One afternoon, as he wiped grease from his brow, Hank came over with a beer in one hand and a phone in the other. "You ever heard of Hollis King?" he asked. Jack looked up. "Used to race dirt tracks, right? Built custom engines out west." "Yeah. Retired now. Got some restoration business." He saw a photo of your truck on that Facebook page Cindy posted. Jack blinked. "What?" Hank handed him the phone. Sure enough, Cindy, Hank's daughter, had snapped a picture of the Chevy under a caption that read, "My Uncle Jack rebuilding beauty from ashes. Hashtag old school craft." Jack stared at the screen like it was written in a foreign language. Hank grinned. "He wants to talk. Said he's curious what kind of work you're doing out here in the sticks." Jack nodded slowly, a strange numbness spreading through him. All he could think was, I almost didn't come back to that yard. He called the number that night. The man on the other end had a voice like gravel and molasses. They talked for 40 minutes, about the truck, the fire, the loss. And finally, Hollis said something Jack didn't expect. "You're not just fixing metal, son. You're telling stories through machines. That's rare. Come see me." Jack didn't sleep that night. Not out of nerves. But because something inside him had begun to hum again, like an engine reawakened. Jack didn't pack much. Just a duffel bag with clothes, a box of tools, and a photo of Cole from when he was 10, grinning with a wrench in his hand, standing beside a go-kart they built together. Jack stared at that picture longer than he should have. Then slipped it in the side pocket like a quiet prayer. The drive to Arizona was long, dry, and thick with memory. Mile after mile, he replayed the fire, the silence that followed, and the slow resurrection of his hands. The truck, the Chevy C10, wasn't finished, but it didn't matter. He was going to Hollis King now. Whatever that meant. Hollis lived just outside Tucson, in a compound that looked part junkyard, part museum, part madman's dream. There were frames of vintage race cars half-stripped on cinder blocks, engines resting on padded benches like museum exhibits, and rusted nameplates tacked to the side of every garage. When Jack pulled in, a man stepped out from a warehouse with his sleeves rolled and hands like boulders. He wasn't tall, but he had gravity, like someone who didn't have to talk loud to be heard. "You're Jack," he said, no question mark. "Yeah." Hollis gave one nod, then turned. "Come see something." That was the beginning. They didn't talk much that day. They stripped a 1972 GTO frame down to its bones and rebuilt the front suspension. Jack didn't need instruction. Hollis didn't offer it. They moved like two musicians who knew the same tune. After 10 hours, sweat-drenched and famished, they sat on the back steps, passing a flask of bourbon. "Why'd you come?" Hollis finally asked. Jack didn't answer right away. The sky above them had gone from orange to indigo. He stared at it a long moment, then said, "Because I didn't know what else to do. And because the truck, it made me feel like I hadn't wasted everything." Hollis took a long pull. "You didn't waste anything. You lived a hard life. That's where the soul comes from. Soul's what separates a restored engine from a dead one." Jack stayed with Hollis for 3 weeks. During that time, he rebuilt an entire '69 Mustang GT, helped design a custom dual-carb system for a client in Colorado, and slept in a cot beside boxes of old carburetor kits. It wasn't glamorous. But it was real. And it was paying. One day, a younger guy named Tim came in, a client from Los Angeles. A real estate flipper with a taste for vintage cars. He saw Jack welding a custom manifold and asked, "You do this kind of work freelance?" Jack shrugged. "If the pay's right." Tim handed over a card. "Come see me. I got 3 classics sitting in my garage, and no one I trust to touch 'em." Jack didn't think much of it, until Hollis, later that night, leaned over the workbench and said, "You should go. That kid's a pain in the ass, but he's loaded. Want someone who knows old school integrity. That's you." Jack rubbed his chin. "I ain't no businessman anymore." Hollis snorted. "Then learn. Being good with your hands don't mean you gotta stay broke. You've paid your dues. Time to cash a little in." Something about that landed deep. The next morning, Jack packed again. Hollis handed him an envelope. "What's this?" "You're cut for the Mustang. And a note with a guy's number in LA, he owes me a favor. He'll get you a workspace." Jack hesitated. "Why are you helping me?" Hollis looked at him for a long time, then said, "Because I've seen fire too. And because someone once pulled me out of my wreck. Now I'm paying it forward." Jack drove west with a full tank and a full heart. Somewhere outside Palm Springs, his phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. "Heard you're the guy who rebuilt the C10. I want one just like it. Blank check. Call me." Jack pulled over and stared at the message. The world was shifting. And this time, it wasn't burning, it was opening. The workspace in LA wasn't glamorous. It was a converted loading dock in the back of an old print shop, barely 900 square feet, half of it cluttered with unused pallets and rusted office chairs. But Jack saw potential. Concrete floor, a steel roll-up door, decent lighting, and, best of all, freedom. The first night, he slept on a cot beside a stripped Pontiac Lemon someone had abandoned years earlier. He didn't mind. The dust, the creak of the pipes, the smell of gasoline in the morning, it all felt like home again. The client who had texted him, real name Dorian Skiles, was an entertainment lawyer who collected classic trucks like other men collected rare watches. He arrived in a black Tesla, dressed in sneakers that probably cost more than Jack's whole tool chest. "I don't care about price," Dorian said, walking around the dusty space with sunglasses still on. "I want authenticity. Not showroom polish, soul. Make it look like it's lived a life, but make it purr like new." Jack nodded. "I can do that." Dorian handed him a thick envelope and walked away without shaking hands. Inside the envelope, $10,000 cash. That night, Jack bought a used compressor, a proper lift, and an espresso machine. He didn't drink espresso, but it felt like something a guy running a business should have. Then the calls started. Not from Dorian, he was a ghost after the envelope, but from others. Word of mouth spread faster than Jack expected. A famous bass player wanted his grandfather's Cadillac restored, to its funeral day glory. A retired stuntman with a broken collarbone wanted a custom suspension that could take a hit without rattling my teeth. Jack was working 14-hour days and sleeping with a notepad on his chest, waking up to scribble part numbers in the middle of the night. Somewhere in the rhythm of labor, he realized, he didn't just have a business again, he was the business. But it was different this time. He wasn't chasing invoices. He wasn't paying 3 employees and fighting with city inspectors. He was one man, a set of hands, and a reputation growing by the week. And then, one afternoon, he saw the name. Cole Morrissey. On an email inquiry. The subject line, "Need help with an old project." Jack stared at the screen for a long time. He didn't open it right away. He just looked at it, like it might evaporate. When he finally clicked, the message was short. "Hey Dad. I saw your name on a forum. Someone said you brought a Chevy back from the dead. I still have the go-kart we built. It's rusted and broken. Thought maybe you'd want to fix it. Together. Cole. Jack exhaled. For the first time in months, his hands shook, not from strain or excitement, but from something deeper. He called. The phone rang once, twice. Then. Hello. Cole. Yeah. Silence. For a moment, it felt like static was the only thing connecting them. I'd like that, Jack said. A breath on the other end. You sure? Jack almost laughed. Kid, you're the only thing I've ever been sure about. They agreed to meet in Fresno. Halfway. Neutral ground. Jack closed the garage early that Friday and hit the highway with nothing in the back but an empty trailer and a heart so full it hurt. When he saw Cole standing in the lot of an old gas station, holding that busted go-kart like it was sacred, Jack's eyes welled. The reunion wasn't dramatic. There were no tears. No apology speeches. Just a handshake that lingered too long, and the kind of smile a father waits his whole life to see again. Back at the garage, they worked in tandem. Cole had picked up more than Jack realized. He knew torque specs, wiring tricks, even how to read a vacuum gauge. As they worked, the hours folded into each other like time had taken a breath. One night, after a full day under the hood, Cole leaned back and said, "You think it's weird I kept it all these years?" Jack shook his head. No. I think you were just waiting for the right moment to bring it back. And just like that, the fire that had taken everything began to feel like something else. Not an ending. A cleansing. The go-kart restoration took less than a week, but Jack would have stretched it out for a month if he could. There was something sacred about the way Cole moved around the shop, measured, quiet, deliberate, like he was listening to something no one else could hear. Jack watched him from behind the welder's mask one afternoon and thought, he's better than I was at that age. They didn't talk much about the past. The missed birthdays. The long silences. The graduation Jack never showed up for. But the weight of it hung in the air, acknowledged if not discussed. It was the kind of forgiveness that didn't need to be spoken, it just grew in the gaps where blame used to live. After they finished the cart, Cole did something unexpected. He stayed. He started showing up early, bringing coffee, asking about wiring diagrams and supply orders. Jack found himself leaving space for him, on the bench, in the plans, in the rhythm of the day. It was like learning to breathe all over again, but slower, better. Then one evening, after closing up shop, Cole said, "I've been thinking about something." Jack grunted, sliding a drawer shut. "Go on." "I want in. Not just part-time. I want to make this a real thing. Me and you. Morrissey Customs." Jack looked up. The words caught him off guard. Not because he hadn't hoped for them, but because he never thought he deserved to hear them. "You sure?" Jack asked. "This life, it's not flashy. You'll be up to your elbows in grease 6 days a week." Cole smiled. "Yeah, well. I tried suits. Didn't fit." That night, Jack dusted off the notebook he'd been keeping, the one with estimates, parts lists, ideas he never thought he'd use. He slid it across the bench toward Cole. "Here. Been writing down some things. For a real shop." Cole flipped it open, eyes skimming over sketches, numbers, notes in messy scrawl. "This is solid." Jack hesitated. "I never told you this, but, after the fire, I thought maybe I'd earned it. The loss. For choosing the business over everything else. Over you." Cole didn't look up, but his voice was steady. "I used to think that too. But now. I think maybe we both just didn't know how to hold on to each other." They filed the LLC the next week. Rented the warehouse next door. Painted the walls white. Hung the photo of the rebuilt C10 right above the office desk, like a guardian watching over the place. Clients kept coming. One brought a 1941 Harley, another a half-sunk boat trailer he swore had the bones of something beautiful. Jack didn't question it. He just smiled and took the challenge. A podcast featured them. Then a local news crew did a segment called Father-Son Grease and Grace. The inbox exploded. Then came the call. It was from a woman named Lita Warner, a documentary producer who had stumbled across the podcast. She wanted to do a feature on mechanics who rebuild more than machines. "I'm not much for cameras," Jack muttered into the phone. But Cole nudged him. "It's not about us looking good. It's about telling the real story. How you crawled out of that fire." The doc aired 6 months later on a streaming platform neither of them subscribed to. But when it hit, everything changed. Parts suppliers reached out. Investment offers came through. Auto enthusiasts from Australia to Argentina emailed asking if they shipped overseas. Jack kept a sticky note on the inside of his toolbox. One line, written in permanent marker. "Don't chase the fire. Build from the ashes." And he did. Every day. But even as money flowed in, and orders stacked up, and the Morrissey name grew from dusty garage legend to national brand, Jack's proudest moment came quietly. It was a Sunday morning. Cole had just locked the garage when he tossed Jack a beer and said, "So, when are we teaching my kid to weld?" Jack froze. Cole just grinned. "You're gonna be a grandfather." And for the first time since the fire, Jack cried. Not because of loss, but because of everything that had come after. The day the baby was born, Jack didn't touch a wrench. He paced the hospital hallway like a man waiting for a verdict, flinching every time the double doors swung open. Leah was there too, older now, but still with that edge in her voice when she asked if he was going to faint in the delivery room. He didn't. He stood beside Cole, who stood beside Kara, and when the nurse finally handed over a bundled little girl with wild dark hair, Jack's knees nearly gave out. Cole looked over and said, "Her name's June. After Mom's favorite song." Jack nodded. He remembered Leah playing that Ella Fitzgerald record every Sunday morning while cooking pancakes, humming under her breath even when things between them had gone dry. And now, here was June, born into something so fragile and miraculous that Jack couldn't speak. Instead, he kissed his son on the head and whispered, "You did good, kid." In the months that followed, the business didn't slow. It evolved. They took on apprentices, young men and women who'd grown up on tablets and Teslas, now learning the feel of analog grit under their fingernails. One of them, a girl named Yaz from East LA, showed up with an old Ford Fairlane on a flatbed and said, "My brother died. This was his. I want to bring it back right." Jack said nothing, just opened the shop door wider. They launched a program, Ashes to Engines, taking on one restoration a quarter, for free, for people who had lost something. A spouse. A child. A dream. People wrote in with letters that Jack kept in a drawer he never showed anyone. He read them when the shop was quiet, when Cole had gone home to June, when the silence started to feel too familiar. One letter came from a kid in Nebraska. His dad had been a mechanic, too. Killed in a grain elevator collapse. The boy, 16, had found his father's '88 Ram in a field. Had saved up for parts, watched YouTube videos, but couldn't figure out the wiring. Jack didn't send parts. He sent Cole. "Go," he told his son. "Teach him. Don't just fix the truck. Show him why we do it." It became a thing. Jack and Cole didn't just build anymore. They taught. They listened. They showed people how metal, when shaped with care, could hold stories better than any book. One summer evening, Jack walked out behind the garage to where the old C10 sat, now fully restored, its paint deep like molasses, its engine singing in idle. He ran his hand along the hood and smiled. "I thought this was where my life ended," he whispered to no one. He was wrong. The fire hadn't destroyed him. It had revealed him. Stripped of everything false, everything performative, it left behind only what was real, his hands, his heart, his family. And from that, came something richer than money. Still, money came. More than he knew what to do with. One day, Cole asked, "Ever think about selling?" Jack looked up, startled. "The business?" "Yeah. Got an offer. Big one." Jack turned back to the workbench. "What did you say?" Cole paused. "Told them no. This isn't a product. It's a place. A legacy. Besides," he smiled, "June's getting good with a wrench." Jack laughed, a deep, shaking laugh that filled the shop. Legacy. That word used to scare him. Now, it felt like a promise. He pulled down an old notebook. The same one he'd handed Cole. And at the bottom of the last page, he scribbled a final line. We didn't get rich rebuilding engines. We got rich remembering what matters. And he closed the book for good. Years passed, but the smell of oil and old steel never left Jack's clothes. He no longer worked the shop floor every day. His back stiffened in the mornings, and his hands ached in the cold. But he still came in, early, always early. Before the others. When the world was still half asleep and the hum of memory filled the empty space between the workbenches. He'd walk past each project, tap a wrench here, adjust a clamp there. Sometimes he'd just sit in the corner and listen. Not to the workers, but to the sound, the music of grinders, ratchets, torque, and tension. The sound of a life rebuilt. One morning, June, now 8 years old, walked into the shop wearing overalls and clutching a small notebook of her own. "Grandpa," she said, holding it up, "can you show me how to make one of these?" Jack knelt slowly, taking the book in his hands. The pages were filled with sketches, childlike, imprecise, but full of intent. "What's this one?" he asked, pointing. "That's a car that flies but not in the air. It just goes really fast so it feels like flying." Jack smiled. "That's the best kind of car." They spent the day sketching together. She asked about gears, belts, pistons. He didn't simplify the answers. Kids didn't need lies, they needed the dignity of real words. At lunch, Cole brought sandwiches. They sat under the hood of a '53 Bel Air, legs swinging, grease on their hands. "I get it now," Cole said quietly. "What it meant to you. Why you chose it all those years." Jack didn't answer right away. He just looked at his son. Then at his granddaughter. Then around the garage that had risen from nothing but soot and grief. "I didn't choose it instead of you," Jack finally said. "I chose it because I thought it was how I could give you more. I just forgot to bring you with me." Cole nodded. "Well, you brought us here." That night, Jack went home and opened the safe in his closet. Inside was the insurance denial letter from the fire. He hadn't read it in years. He didn't need to. But he took it out, lit the fireplace, and fed it to the flames without ceremony. Some fires destroy. Some purify. The next morning, he arrived at the shop to find June already there, elbows deep in a rusted lawnmower engine, hair tied back with a zip tie, her little brow furrowed with concentration. "You gonna watch?" she asked, not looking up, "or you gonna teach me how to fix this thing?" Jack grinned. The legacy was safe. The engines would keep running. And Jack Morrissey, once burned to the ground, had become something far rarer than rich. He had become whole.